Welcome back to the Darkest Theory podcast. I am your host, ScrapBrain, along with Subtle. How's it going, dude?
What's going on?
So, last week we reacted to the video for the anniversary event, and now we have the PTB in our hands. We've tested it out a bit, so we're gonna go over it. Let's jump right in, starting with, the premier marquee edition, the new killer, the Singularity. An AI bot who puts biopods all around. There are 8 of them, not 7. And that allows the killer to like scope around and plant its goop on the survivors, and then it can eventually teleport back to where the survivor is. We've both played around with it a bit. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean the ability is interesting. There's also like the EMP portion of the power, sort of like how there are ways to counter the 2 Resident Evil killers where there's stuff on the map. Same with like jigsaw boxes or Freddy's, sort of the clocks, the alarm clocks to sort of reset the
The
timer.
plague
Yeah,
fountains.
exactly. Like there's another like sort of killer item on the map. We'll go over that a little bit more. So there is counterplay, but the actual effect is really strong. Being able to teleport right next to the survivor, he's able to act out extremely quickly. Pretty close to, I would say, what Hag would be able to do coming out of the teleport. But the interesting thing is, right, you have the goop that's used to mark the survivor. You can use the those like camera biopods to again lock onto someone who's already been tagged to teleport, or you can actually just use your gun. Initially, if they're not tagged, you can't just shoot onto them. But once they've been tagged, you can, which is a pretty significant upgrade. You can kind of just like, it takes like maybe a half second of consistent locking on, and then you just auto teleport. So maybe moonwalking at windows or something to try to get the survivor. I'm thinking like at Shack to like run across, and then you can sort of like point through and teleport that way, or you can kind of just shoot through a window, put a biopod inside of a structure or something like that, and then you can switch to the cam. It feels really strong. You have the ability to just auto break pallets if they try to stun you. You're supposed to get some sort of like temporary hindered effect if you get stunned, and it does the auto break. So it kind of looks like Spirit Fury a little bit, but like the the survivors finishing the throw animation, so they're getting hit regardless. I don't really feel like the hindered does all that much. Like you're still getting the hit if they decide to try to stun you with the pallet. I guess unless they have like smash hit, maybe. I don't really know what else would get you away fast enough. Even that might not get you out of range in time. But the other thing too is, even if you don't have that, if they pre-throw, you break stuff 75% faster, that or breakable walls, and you also vault 75% faster, so nearly double speed on a vault. So there are other ways that even if they get to a resource after you tag them, you do catch up pretty quickly. And he seems to kind of just sort of bully his way through resources very quickly if he's getting the tags. So I think like the team strategy and using those EMPs and stuff, as we'll talk about, seems to sort of be the key to shutting him down. The EMPs might be a little too accessible right now. I don't It's like a fine line, because like the upside for tagging and teleporting is so crazy, but
Mm-hmm.
right now it just seems like slightly too difficult to get, especially that like once you teleport, it doesn't remove the tag, so you can literally like tag a healthy survivor, teleport, hit, and then teleport and hit again. And so it only goes away with the EMP or upon being hooked. It's not even being down. You have to actually be hooked. So it's strong, and we'll have to see. It's going to be tricky, I think, to balance it where it's fun for both sides and doesn't feel like too difficult to use his power as the killer, but also doesn't feel like you're just like out of options as survivor when you're going against them.
Yeah, I feel like it's uh in a pretty good place right now, honestly. I do agree that it seems a little easy to get the EMPs. The activation time is like nothing, and the range is pretty solid on what it affects. The like from the killer side, it doesn't take too terribly long to mark a survivor, but it allows for counterplay from the survivors. Like it's not just immediate. It feels kind of like a mix between a little bit of Ghostface, a little bit of Plague, and a little bit of Hag. like your to get the initial slipstream on the survivor, you have to stalk them kind of like Ghostface. Um, and then you can teleport like Hag and it spreads between people kind of like Plague. But instead of dealing with like area control like Hag or instant down or like one hit down with Plague or with Ghostface, you're dealing with map mobility, lethality, that kind of stuff. So I think that this is a really well designed killer. I think that it incorporates vague ideas of other killers that we've seen before, but in a way that isn't, the 3 gen playstyle really lending to itself really strongly that we've had with the last 2 chapters. I think that the EMPs have a very strong effect, but I agree that it's kind of necessitated by how powerful the teleporting is. The overdrive that you get as the new killer is pretty strong. It doesn't last like a terribly long period of time, um, but it's another thing that you have to earn. I really like most of what's going on in this chapter, and a lot of it has to do with the killer. I think it's both going to be fun and interesting to play as and against.
Yeah, it kind of feels like this is what they wanted to go for, right? It's a similar like style of killer that plays off of like AoE info, the same way that like Skull Merchant kind of does, or like the way that guards sort of patrol an area. Like I think they're trying to move into less just like this power just like shuts down a loop no matter what, but rather than this being like you're kind of surveying areas while also having like some anti-loop, but there is like legitimate counterplay. But it feels healthy, which is nice, and also like because of how long the biopods get disabled from the EMP, it pretty much means that like one EMP use, like if you grab an EMP and go to a gen, even in a 3 gen situation, it's just gonna turn off all of the biopods in the area for 60 seconds. So he can still, the singularity can still go into the biopod for like viewing purposes, but it can't actually tag anyone, and there is no like sound, although there is an add-on that like allows it to get some sound.
Hmm.
But generally like one EMP can pretty much just like safeguard a generator for close to the full duration, and more than that if a couple people are kind of teamed up and co-oping on a gen. So it will force the killer, even though they know they're over there, there's no like downside other than the information as far as like the survivors are concerned. The killer would have to go and like on foot go to the gen to like start trying to pressure and maybe reset up the
And the
biopods.
good thing is, like you mentioned, if 2 people go and team up on a gen, if they have EMPs, like if 2 people go there, the first person uses their EMP, then there won't be any kind of slipstream to affect back and forth. So they can safely just sit there for 60 seconds. The gen, let's say, for some reason doesn't pop, somebody gets chased off or whatever, then the second person is there with their EMP to disable the biopods again after the 60 seconds.
Yeah, it seems right now that as long as you respect the strength of the slipstream effect and are willing to go and take those few seconds to like just keep an EMP on you, or like know that one's nearby so you can grab it in a pinch, like you have to respect that how strong it is. But if you do that and on top of it, it can be pretty difficult for the killer. But like you said, like I don't think it's like terribly imbalanced. It doesn't feel like the killer's like unplayable or anything like that.
Right.
He could probably use like a slight buff by just tweaking the EMP, but if you go too far, then he's just going to feel like a monster. He's going to feel like unstoppable. So I don't mind a slight tweak, but they have to be a little bit careful. I hope that they're like willing to keep tinkering with it, so that way it feels good for both sides. They seem more willing to do like constant updates, but yeah,
Just
I don't want to see it.
entirely from a flavor standpoint, I wish that the EMP affected the singularity itself, like shut it down for a little bit. Gameplay wise, that would be horrendous.
Yeah.
Like I can't think of any amount of time, even if it just like stopped all of your momentum and then you started up again, I still think that that would be too strong. But just like strictly from a flavor perspective, it seems really weird that an EMP would not have any effect on the killer itself when it's an AI machine.
Yeah.
But gameplay wise, No,
Yeah,
absolutely,
I don't think that
absolutely
that's
not.
something that would work. They'd have to like really redesign the power and like severely reduce like EMP. Like yeah, they'd have to like start over from scratch, I think, if they were going to try to like make that interaction a thing. But yeah.
Yeah, well, with the new killer comes all of the new add-ons with it. My very first thought when looking through the add-ons is there is one that is clearly better than the rest, and I think this add-on is insane. This is the Crew Manifest. It is a very rare add-on, and it says, oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. It is the Denied Requisition Form. Sorry. It is very rare, and it says, at the start of the trial, EMPs take 30 seconds longer to generate, and all survivors start the match slipstreamed. This effect seems insane to me. Uh, I think this is better than both of its ultra rares. I think it just seems like far and away the best thing to be doing. And if if this is how it goes live, I don't think it's like oppressively strong, but I think it's definitely like very, very, very solid, and is what people who are trying to um, you know, get the best performance out of their game, what they'll be running for it.
Yeah, I think like that with like lethal, where you're just like, okay, I can find a survivor and I know that I can teleport because no one can have EMPs yet. Sure, by the time you get the first down and first hook, depending on how well they use resources and maybe try and stay out of line of sight, you might be able to have a situation where the survivors have the EMPs come up fast enough, especially if they decide to like sit there and have it charge, have the boxes charge faster.
Poke it.
But yeah, but if you, yeah, it feels very similar in like general design to Wesker's thing where everyone starts infected, where it forces you to go and interact with the killer object right away, or like the Freddy where everyone stays asleep, but or starts asleep rather. But the effect isn't quite as crazy as Wesker's, which also has the like persisting effect of every time you become fully infected, you're also exposed. So he doesn't have to use the power to down you; he could just M1 you. That's not the case. It's not like you become exposed or anything, but it does force you. It does allow him to have a really strong first chase, like much quicker because you're already tagged, which is probably like the hardest part of his power to use. And then on top of that, you're forcing the team to utilize, similar to the Wesker, you're forcing them to use the EMPs. Granted, they regenerate, but it does take a while. So you're going to be down, maybe if you group up and all like kind of remove it with one EMP, that's probably like the best play, honestly, to try to save
Well,
your EMPs. But again, you'd have to not be found while you're doing that. You'd have to like,
and then there's downtime where people are having traverse together.
right,
I guess the counter to this idea is ironically to bring the shroud of
binding, right?
binding or
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
that
yeah.
thing that no survivor ever uses. Because then you're all grouped together, so there's less downtime to be able to use an EMP together. But in a general game, you may have like two survivors over here, two survivors over here. One of these ones gets chased. Now, for this one, if you want to maximize that, then they'd have to run over. It can get kind of murky because
It
then that's a lot of downtime.
Yeah, I wouldn't be. I think like if two people were together, right? Similar to how like I know I'm comparing it to Wesker a bunch, but it's similar, right? At the beginning, where like one person could retrieve a spray themselves, spray a teammate. Similar to that,
Hmm.
like one they could kind of huddle while one person like generates the EMP faster, and then just sheds it for both of them, and then they can kind of go on their way. So like there could be stuff like that to try to mitigate how many EMPs you're depleting right at the start. But yeah, it seems like the strongest. His add-ons are actually like pretty interesting. Like there's a lot of killers that have like the brown, like there's multiple tiers of add-ons that all do the same effect, but they climb in like effectiveness as you go up the tiers. He doesn't,
Numerical
yeah,
changes.
exactly, like higher
Yeah.
percentages, but he doesn't really have that style of like add-on design pretty much at all.
Hmm.
So there's a lot like a lot of them just like completely do new effects, which is kind of how they designed Skull Merchant's add-ons, honestly, where like it just kind of gives completely new effects to her drones, where you're exhausted or hindered, or the Skull Merchant gets additional haste, or blindness, whatever the case may be, undetectable, things like that, longer undetectable. So there's like a lot of different ways. It's going to be hard, I think, to like a big part is going to be figuring out what add-ons the killer is bringing in any given match to try to counter it and understand like where they might be trying to catch you off guard, things like that. Like there is an exhaustion add-on, different things of that nature. You can get additional pods. You can, like I said, you
Yeah,
can
the
the pods
two
can let you
additional pods
hear
at
as well.
the two additional pods at brown rarity, I think, is pretty reasonable. Like, especially in a larger map like Mother's Dwelling or the new
Hmm.
map that we'll talk about. I think that the two extra pods really gives a lot of ability to get good map traversal, because if you are able to place them around a large map, then you're able to control more area and teleport if you are able to find a survivor on one of them.
Yeah, it will let you like keep a pod near all the gens, but still have a couple at your disposal for like mid chase. And you can like remove pods because if you go over the number, it's like Hag where it removes the oldest one. But you can also like manually point at one that's near you and just remove it and add it, like re-add it to your counter. So there's like trying, being careful of not accidentally removing one that's like controlling a gen across the map, even if it's like temporarily disabled. You might not want to do that and let the timer like reset if it had been like hit by an EMP, something like that. That could definitely give you some more flexibility. It's kind of like, demo having like an additional portal or something like that is like really, really strong. Obviously, demo can't take back his portals without that like one brown add-on that like destroys it or whatever. But
Right.
yeah, he has like pretty interesting add-ons but again, that one purple is like really stands out from the rest in terms of its strength. And considering how creative I feel like they went with the add-ons as a whole, it would be nice if that was toned down some amount. Like I feel like it doesn't have to be both effects of you all start like infected, like tagged, and it takes longer to generate. It could just be like everyone just starting tagged is a crazy effect. So I would rather they try to keep it so that all the add-ons seem appealing, and that way we get like some nice variation in terms of what people utilize. But
Yeah, I don't know that I fully agree with that. Like I said, I think that this is clearly like the most powerful add-on, but I think if you broke it up, it's basically like running just that add-on now on the PTB, which I don't know. I don't think that it's that insane. I think that it's very strong, but I don't think that it's broken by any means. Um, so I wouldn't hate if maybe it was like 15 or 20 seconds extra for the starting ones, but I think if you broke it up, I think that would be pretty bad.
yeah, I was
Um,
actually just kind of thinking, I wonder if that's something that they would consider to be like a base kit or something, where like people start infected to try to like mitigate the like if that's their way of handling the EMP issue of being too strong at the start,
or
and
maybe
then
the first EMP takes like base kit 15 extra seconds,
it
and
does
then
now,
this,
right?
yeah, then this add-on maybe adds, or maybe it's like, I don't know. So, playing with those numbers a little bit. Maybe the first one takes a little bit longer, kind of like how, oh, it takes a little bit for the Onryo TVs to turn on,
Mm-hmm.
or um,
Like
something like
Freddy
that.
teleport or Dredge teleport takes like some time at the beginning before they can use it,
Yeah,
something
yeah,
like that, to try to mitigate it. Yeah, I just kind of that just kind of popped in my head that might be an option to try to like
yeah,
kill two birds with one stone, where you're helping the EMP issue but also helping the like add-on diversity issue of like making that more base kit and then I don't know,
yeah.
reworking it to something different. But
Well, one thing that we did talk about is kind of comparing this to other add-ons, including notably we were talking about the uh, ultra rare add-on for Wesker, where you start infected, but it makes you exposed if you get fully infected. No exposed add-ons for this killer, and I am so incredibly happy about that. I think that this killer's power is strong towards lethality anyway. I think that having it be able to get somebody exposed just with an add-on is way overkill. I think if you want to get exposed, you're going to have to, I mean, as it stands now, you're going to have to rely on perks anyway. But I think that that's a really good design. This killer is leaning towards chase and lethality anyway. I'm extremely happy that they did not give him an exposed add-on.
Yeah, that definitely is like
And it's very
notorious.
lazy too.
Yeah, it's like the notorious thing where like like so many killers iridescent add-ons are like some sort of insta down effect. Even Huntress, right, doesn't have the exposed effect technically, but her hatchets become chainsaws instead. So it's just like it's like a very like yeah, like you said, it's a very lazy design. I actually do really like what they did overall with the add-ons. But yeah, we'll kind of have to see what people gravitate toward, and uh, it'll certainly be interesting. I'm actually surprisingly like happy with the design of the killer overall, especially considering the last two chapters, and then like the general like vague trailer and explanation of the power was a little concerning that like
Yeah.
we were again having like a 3 gen thing. But and as we'll talk about in a little while, they are like making it clear that they are aware that 3 gens are really boring and a problem and very prevalent, which probably is why they nerfed Call of Brine over Charge Eruption in the last few months. But it seems like they are actually aware and plan to do more, as we'll talk about in a little while. But
Yeah. In the meantime, though, let's move to the perks. Let's start with the perks for the singularity itself. First off, we're going to talk about genetic limits. So this says that when a survivor finishes a heal action, that can be on themselves or on another survivor, they suffer from the exhaustion status effect for 32 seconds. My first thought was trying to pair this with like um, Mindbreaker, Fearmonger, or maybe Blood Echo to try and lean heavily into exhausted um, EX.
yeah.
Uh, and I think that that's probably like too overkill, especially with how little Dead Hard is seeing play. Like you still have Sprint Burst, you still have Lithe, you still have all of these other exhaustion perks, and you'll be able to get consistent value through your matches with this. But I think devoting, half or 3/4 of your build just to stopping exhaustion perks is too much. This perk by itself, I think, is totally fine. I think that 32 seconds is an impactful period of time, but not anything that's overbearing. You're going to get consistent value out of this throughout the entirety of the match. Uh, I think that similar to Fearmonger, people who are running Sprint Burst can kind of utilize this to springboard a 99 on their Sprint Burst. But like for most general uses, I think that this is going to be pretty solid. It's less impactful, I think, than Fearmonger in terms of people are going to be touching gens more than they're going to be completing full heal actions on survivors. Uh, but I still think that this is reasonable.
Yeah, I think like you said, I think it pairs really well with Blood Echo because both like inflict a pretty long exhaustion like cooldown. Like I could see it being really good on maybe like a hit and run play style, perhaps like Wraith or something with like sloppy where you're keeping people injured, so whenever you're getting the hooks, Blood Echo is inflicting them, anyone who's injured, but then they're going to want to not be injured, so they're not getting hit by more Blood Echo. And obviously, like, hit and run is pretty scary because of the stealth. So, like, they're exhausted while they're injured, and then they get uninjured, and then they exhaust. Like, if they're healing each other, then they're getting exhausted again. And then, ideally, if you're the killer, by that amount of time that's gone by, you're getting another hook. And maybe getting some more hits to put Blood Echo and like kind of keep that cycle going where you might be able to just keep people exhausted for a large majority of the match. I get that what you're saying where it's similar to Fearmonger where it could springboard you into 99ing your exhaustion for Sprint Burst specifically. And this would have been a much more meaningful this would have been a much more meaningful addition when Dead Hard was also being run, because now there's definitely a good number of survivors that are just not running exhaustion, or they're running Sprint Burst, which is probably the best one at not even getting injured in the first place, where this would trigger. So again, I think there's going to be some builds. I think like hit and run and stuff will be pretty good, but especially for like it seems like a lot of like, it seems like this would have to be paired with another perk that exhausts or like an add-on to like really synergize and get you like a lot of value. On its own, it's like meh, I think, like kind of okay. but
Yeah,
no
I think
cooldown
it's
is nice too.
yeah, I think it's like fine design. If I think about like most situations in our games, okay, so let's think about the hit and run playstyle, right? So you're running in your example, you're running this perk, you're running Blood Echo, you're running Sloppy, um, and then like maybe some kind of gen regression, maybe nurses, since you're going to be running Sloppy so that you can interrupt the heals. I mean, at that point, if you're running that, then Septic Touch is probably better than this perk,
Possible, yeah, if you're like interrupting. I could see it
right?
maybe like on like if you did like Legion with this and Blood Echo, where like now no one has like access to sprint or lithe, so they either like everyone's staying injured, or like even like Plague or something if people like are opting not to cleanse. Well, I guess no, I guess if you're using the
That's not a heal
yeah, I guess
action.
if you're using that, it would have to be like specifically if you're healing after she uses red power. So like I feel like there's like a very like small number of killers that could figure out a build to make use of it, but I think like
Yeah.
on the whole, I
I
don't
do
think.
feel like there is some use for it, and I
Yeah,
don't think that it's a bad perk. I don't know. It
it's not
doesn't
it's not
quite get there.
meta. Yeah, it's not meta where it's just gonna like replace like it's just it's too niche. I think it's good in that niche, and like there, like I said, like Wraith is definitely like Wraith and like Legion. I think like thinking about it more like the two that like stand out as killers that could utilize it well, especially if paired with like Blood Echo. But it
Oh,
there's yeah there it really depends on playstyle. This also could get more use and blood echo, as we'll talk about with some of the survivor perks that are coming out. If people decide to stay injured more, that could blood echo could be more of a threat, which would like people have to be afraid of staying injured for this perk to work, right? That's like
I
the only
don't
way you get
I
value.
don't want to talk this idea that I just had into existence.
You have to now.
Uh Sadako with the ring drawing,
Oh yeah.
cuz this doesn't say healed to full. It just
Yeah,
says
this
complete a heal action.
yeah, this would like condemned playstyle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna happen.
Ah.
Yeah, that's definitely gonna happen. No
All right,
question.
let's move on. Forced hesitation. So this one says that whenever you down a survivor, any other survivors within 16 meters get hindered by 15% for 10 seconds, and it has a 40-second cooldown. That is a humongous hinder percent. That's so impactful. That's more. I think that's the highest hinder percent out of anything in the game.
I think that's like I'd have to look up what like the only thing I think is like clowns bottles. I don't know exactly how much hindered that is. That's the only thing that I think is like comparable is in terms of like
Or
how
maybe
much you would
maybe
get slowed
Freddy
down.
snares. I'm not sure.
Maybe, yeah, possibly, but yeah, it's a
It's
insane
a
as
crazy percent.
yeah, it's an insane percent. Yeah, no question.
My first thought was pairing this with Infectious Fright. The radius for this is significantly smaller than you're almost always going to get for your terror radius for Infectious Fright. But if somebody is close enough, it can uh, pretty easily guarantee a follow-up hit. There are absolutely situations where it won't. If they're like on the other side of a wall and there's a window or something like that. But if for some reason people are playing around for flashlight or flashbang saves, this can deter that even more. But it's probably overkill with infectious. If you're running infectious already, you should be preparing against flashlight or flashbang saves regardless. Uh, but that was just kind of where my mind went immediately. Did you have any thoughts on this one?
I was trying to think about it. Yeah, like infectious was the first thing I think about in terms of like slugging and looking for people near the down. Um, honestly, when I was thinking about the dredge build that I do with like knockout and like nightfall, it's like this perk only gets value if survivors are like really grouped up, and they'd have to kind of be like not aware that you're coming, so you'd have to have some amount of stealth. So like I'm thinking like who could utilize that, and it's like nightfall perhaps is like a good way to do that if people are grouped up on gens against Ghostface Wraith, stuff like that, and potentially if you're utilizing like save the best for last, right, where you're just
Discordance.
discordance potentially too. But yeah, you're just like you're getting a hit, and then before they can go anywhere, you're just like they can't run. Like 15% hindered is insane. So you'd have to like basically sneak up on people who are like on a gen, maybe like with Tinkerer or like Discordance Tinker, something to that effect, where you're not giving too much info, so that way people like they have to be really grouped up, and you have to get the hit, and then you
Yeah,
can like
like
slug it.
a ghost face with discordance in this perk, I think, is pretty reasonable because you
Mhm.
can stalk somebody, expose them, down them, and then you have the discordance proc, so you know somebody else is right there. They'll leave, but they'll leave pretty fucking slow.
Yeah, you can definitely like use it to get like good slug pressure, where like even if both people, like even if one person's injured and one person's healthy, you could get the injured down and then pretty safely get the extra hit. It's 10 seconds of hindered, so but you know, and with the speed boost of getting hit, if they're not already injured, you're going to get the hit on the healthy one, but that does make it more consistent in terms of getting that like additional health state, which is, you know, pretty massive, especially now that like medkits aren't as prevalent. Like hits are a little
Nurses
bit more meaningful.
also does a similar role as discordance. I think I it does seem like this lends itself more to a stealth killer playstyle. Now that I'm thinking about it more, kind of the opposite of what I initially thought with infectious. But if you're able to, mainly with Ghostface, you're able to get a one hit down, or if you're able to interrupt like two injured survivors that are healing, with any stealth killer, then
Myers, right? You like come around a corner,
yeah.
pop your tier 3 if it's 99 on two people, and you get one hit, and before they can go anywhere, similar to like you're saying with like exposing someone as a ghost face. I
I
think could work.
guess uh Bubba, if you've got like some kind of tinker or something like that, like you were
Trail of
mentioning,
Torment or something. Yeah.
yeah. It does seem more and more like, because you have to know that the other survivor is there if you're not running infectious. So
Right.
I feel like discordance or nurses, or just like visually seeing multiple
Yeah, the
survivors.
best way you're gonna get the visual confirmation is with stealth. Is like the most consistent, because if there's terror radius, like odds are, unless they're really trying to stick a gen that's like about to pop, someone's probably gonna, or both of them are probably gonna try and run away. And by the time you get the down, 60 meters
They'll
isn't
split up.
that massive. Like you'd have to
Yeah.
pretty much hit them at the gen, I think, if you were gonna try and get value.
What about end game for body blocking?
That
Uh,
definitely could, but I think you'd also need like save, right? You would need save, so that way you're just like getting the down, and then you just go and like keep churning out hits or something like that,
yeah.
and
I don't
slugging.
know. This seems like pretty niche also.
Yeah, the range is
There
like it's a crazy effect, so like the range has to be pretty small, or this is just like this with like infection. If it's like infectious range, right? If it's like terror radius, it just you just start popping off with killers with mobility, right? Like Oni or something like that. Like, oh my god, I don't know how you get away from that, but
yeah, you
um
don't.
yeah,
That's the answer.
it seems like it helps like the stealth killers who are not as strong anyway, which is probably a pretty safe way to design perks, is make them help killers that could use the help in the first place. So
Yeah.
I'm not like too worried about this perk being problematic, but it could be nice, and again like in some niche builds, some
This
certain
could work
killers.
with Legion also, because you get the killer instinct. So if you're able to chain hits together, keep them injured, you may have a good idea of where people are. You may be able to down an injured survivor and then get a relatively quick follow up. That's possible.
Yeah, or like again like plague. This one actually
Yeah.
plague, because people like killers that are going to stay injured more often, I think. Like, because if both people are healthy, it's not nearly as scary unless you're like,
Right.
well, like unless you have an insta down. But yeah, I guess if you're going not insta down killers, Legion and Plague are probably pretty decent at that.
Yeah, with Legion though, you get the built-in info with
Sure.
it, with the killer's killer instinct.
Right. Yeah, you'll like know whether someone's nearby.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last one is machine learning. So you, I'm gonna read the actual perk because this thing is
Bizarre.
Weird.
Yeah.
Okay. After performing the damage generator action, this perk activates. While this perk is active, the next generator you damage will be compromised until it's completed. So you have to kick a generator and then kick another generator, right?
No, it's the gen that you kick. It's like the first one you kick.
The first one becomes compromised.
Yeah.
Okay. Uh, the generator is highlighted in yellow. When the compromised generator is completed, you become undetectable and gain a 7% haste for 30 seconds, and then the perk deactivates. If you damage a generator while another generator is compromised, the compromised generator will become the last one damaged.
It's just the last gen you've kicked is the compromised gen, pretty much. Unless it's on cool. It has a cooldown, I think, after or something. I think it has a cooldown after the effect. Maybe not.
No cooldown.
I wonder. You probably can't compromise a gen anyway. When the compromised gen pops, you gain an effect. So I'm assuming maybe while that probably has like a timer. I haven't gotten to test it because it's such a bizarre perk. But I'm assuming that maybe you can't re-compromise a gen until that 30-second timer goes around.
I would not be surprised if that's. I would not be surprised if you are able to.
You might be able
to.
Gen. Yeah. But
I guess that's something we can test at some point.
But yeah, weird perk. I was actually thinking about this perk specifically a bunch earlier because it's such a weird effect. Like 30 seconds of undetectable and 7% haste again is really strong, right? Like 15% hindered on force hesitation, a very strong number. 13 seconds of basically like no ed speed, like, or even more than that, and then also not having any terror radius is like potentially insane, especially if you're an insta down killer. Like I could just think like Bubba just or Billy just like going around with chainsaw and having the haste on top of it. Pretty terrifying. But like it's so weird. Like you have to intentionally like forfeit a gen while also because the gen changes every time you kick a gen, you like can't actively be kicking gens and defending other ones. So like you almost like generally when I was thinking about matches, right? It's like you're kind of protecting an area. So like at the start of the match, if there's like one all the way across map in a corner, you're probably not caring about it. But if you want to get value out of this perk, you might have to like go all the way over there and then like kick it and then go back to defending them.
And then not kick any others.
And then not kick any others to like get value. And like you're also like, again, it's only every time a compromised gen is finished. So maximum is proccing 5 times, which 150 seconds of those effect over the course of a match. Very strong. Odds are you're probably going to get something closer to like 2 or 3 if you're really like you have to get a blend of like good luck and also trying to like bait survivors to finish a specific generator. Like I'm thinking like a 3 gen at the end of the game. If you wanted to like pair this with no ed to just like really go on a rampage when the last gen is finished, you have to like know what gen is gonna get finished and then let them get the last gen, which is just like that's so counterintuitive. I guess if you run like No Way Out, that could allow you to have like more time, but it feels really crazy to like know what you're picking an objective and forfeiting that objective for 30 seconds of some enhanced abilities that may or may not even get value in that like temporary time. So I don't think we're seeing this. This feels like this doesn't even like, I don't even know what like build really works with it to get any sort of consistency. I'd almost rather it be like Deadlock or like Coup, where it gets value every time a gen is finished, but maybe like tone down the effect so there's more consistency. So like a 20 seconds, and it's 5% haste every time a gen's finished or something like that, but it's guaranteed where it's like every time a gen is finished. So like you're lowering the ceiling of the perk, but raising the floor. Because right now it's like, I could easily see this just getting no value over the course of most of your matches.
I'm going to give you my hot take. You ready?
Okay, hit me with it.
This perk is just like actual dog shit. Like,
oh yeah,
you will I agree with everything you said. Like, this effect, the 7% haste and the undetectable for 30 seconds is insane. You're not gonna get it to proc except maybe like once a match. Maybe. And it requires you to be losing your objectives.
Yeah.
This is like coup, except completely unreliable, but busted effect. You're
Yeah.
never gonna get it, but if you do, oh my god, it's gonna be insane.
Yeah, like I could see
This perk is bad.
like I could see I'm sure that there's going to be a content creator that runs it this with coup and it's like, oh my god, 7% haste
And fire up.
and fire, and I'm just like moving around corners with the craziest lunge you've ever seen in your life. Like, cool, I guess, but like it doesn't even synergize.
And they 3 out.
Yeah, it's like you don't it doesn't synergize with gen slowdown because most gen slowdown requires you to kick. So like, other than deadlock, right, it's the same amount of time. Like, deadlock is the one that jumps out at me, where it's like 30 seconds of the most progressed gen, where maybe that gives you an indication of which gen you should compromise next, because that had the most progress, but also it's blocked, so it's very possible that another gen got a lot more progress in those 30 seconds, and now that different gen is the one that's supposed to be compromised. Pain res lets you like slow down gens without having to kick it and like change which gen is compromised. Like, the fact that you have to like forfeit being able to kick gens entirely in order to keep a specific gen compromised. Like, unless you give this effect like an active ability button, like in the gen kick animation, you press E to compromise a specific gen, and then that lets you keep kicking gens. Unless it's something like that where you can control it, I don't think there's like any way this perk is usable.
Here's what you do. You just map out, you precognition, spidey sense, know what order they're going to finish the gens in, go and kick the first one, and then go about your fucking business. Get value out of it. Just know that they're going to wait the full 30 seconds for your effect to be done before they pop the second one, and then this perk is bad. This perk is really bad. I agree, there will be content creators that are going to like play 80 games. Yeah, they're gonna play 80 games and get one clip where they got one insane hit. Congratulations, the perk is bad.
Yeah, I'm really trying to like think of like ways that this could be used. When it's like, corrupt could narrow down the number of available gens to 4, so better odds of which gen they're gonna finish. Like, in terms of picking, like I don't know.
You run corrupt. You go and kick a gen, and then you 3-gen the last ones, so they can only finish that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but again, it's just like,
now you've done nothing for the first 2 minutes of the game. Congratulations.
Yeah, and make sure you don't get it down first. Make sure you wait out the full like 90-second gen time, or I guess if they're co-oping faster. But like, you gotta just chill, otherwise your corrupt goes away, and then they could do any gen. It's like,
it's awful.
It's really it's bad.
Again, the effect is insane, but it's so inconsistent. Does not describe how infrequently you're gonna get this to proc.
If you got this to proc twice in a match, that's like a massive win in terms of like perk value. I just don't even like, in terms of like where the ceiling is for this. 3 is insane. I don't even see how it's possible to get more than that and have like, I just don't see how you could get value from the perk and also have an effective game.
I will put a challenge out there. In a live match, not a custom game, in a live match, if somebody is able to get 5 procs of this with the full 30 seconds each time, I think that is less likely than you getting a grab on somebody using a key on a locked hatch. I think it is easier to get a grab animation on somebody unlocking the locked hatch with a key than it is to get full value out of this perk.
And you also, like, even if you weren't trying, even if you were literally just like farming, where you're just like predicting and not even going for hits, where you're just trying to get it to proc 5 times, that would still be difficult. But forget like, actually, like, I'll even say like 3K. If you can get a 3K and get it to proc 5 times, congrats, I guess. Like, good luck. I won't even say 4K. If you can get 3 kills and get it to proc all 5 times, like, kudos. I guess you like solved DBD. I don't know. Like, I just don't see how it's happening.
And I'm almost like, just like wild things that can happen in the game. I think the thing I described of getting a hatch grab with all 5 pentamentos up at the same time
Yeah, like
is more likely than getting full value out of this.
yeah, I just don't see how it's I don't see
It's
how
never gonna happen.
Oh,
Um,
I guess Pentimento is another slowdown perk that can work with this perk, right? Because it doesn't require you to kick gens.
Plaything, Pentimento, this, and Corrupt.
That seems pretty excessive considering Plaything's already doing the undetectable. Like, I don't know.
Christ. All
Whatever.
right.
Good
Well,
luck.
let's move to the survivors perk. So included with this chapter, we're getting Gabriel Soma, an original character as well. First perk, I'm gonna change up the order that we
Okay.
have it here. I wanna save that one for the last
Sure.
because that's the one that everybody's talking about. So let's start with Troubleshooter. So while you're in chase, you get to see the aura of the gen with the most progress, and you get to see the killer's aura for 6 seconds after throwing a pallet. And this effect will continue for the entire time that you're in the chase, and then for 10 seconds after the chase is over. So this kind of blends a bit of Bond, kind of, with. Mm, it's kind of Bond where you see the gen with the most progress with the HUD. You can see who's on it. So if somebody's on it, then you can kind of steer away from it so that the killer doesn't interrupt them. If nobody's on it, then you know that that's like a free area that is open. If you're running this with, I'm forgetting the perk, um, the one that if you're in chase,
Quick
you're
Gambit.
Quick Gambit, yeah.
Yeah.
So you can run this with Quick Gambit so that you know which gen exactly the person is working on, so you can loop near there so that they can get the Quick Gambit additional speed off of you while running. It's kind of like Alert also because you throw the pallet and you're able to see the killer's aura. Um, it deals a little bit on some of the topics that we were talking about a few weeks ago when we talked about info perks, where similar to like a key, you can know the killer's exact positioning when you're looping them. So you can see if they're mind gaming, if they're doing a standstill tech, if they're doing a moonwalk, if they're just holding W, if they're going to be breaking the pallet. You can see all of these things directly and have direct feedback to path your loop properly, or if you need to leave the tile. So I think that this does a lot of different things together, and the fact that it persists after the chase ends, I think is pretty good. I think that this is like a pretty decently strong info perk. I don't think that it's like amazing. It's not going to be breaking any games, but I think it's good.
Yeah, I think it was like surprisingly like this perk was like cool and like kind of unique, but I didn't think it was going to be that valuable. Like the 6 seconds, the fact that like the perk aura reading, like the aura reading on throwing a pallet, like doesn't have like a cooldown. It's like it's literally just be in chase, throw a pallet, 6 seconds, and you can do that multiple times in the same chase. Is really crazy. Like you have like pretty clear info. It's kind of like like wiretap, or I guess like when your object goes off, like you said with like a key, things like that, where it's like that's a powerful effect, knowing exactly where the killer is even when you don't have line of sight. Like filler tiles and like some junk pallets maybe on like auto haven and stuff where there isn't line of sight, it's not going to be nearly as important. But like at pretty much any maze tile, any like a main building structures, things like that, it's going to be really really nice. uh and like
If they
and
give us any means necessary back, then you can just throw the same pallet
it
again.
was yeah, it was working on the PTB. Like, and the fact, I mean, this is kind of a meme, but like think about like if the killer decides to leave you, right? The effect persists for 10 seconds, so you could literally like throw a random pallet and then see where they're going and then reset it with like any means, something goofy, because
Yeah.
like and also like knowing where the gen with the
And
most
just
progress.
real quick to be
Yeah.
clear, like when the chase ends, there's a timer that goes so that you can see, okay, I'm out of chase now. If I throw the pallet now, I'll still be able to see them.
Yeah, which honestly is really nice because it allows you to still get the aura reading even if you like accidentally break chase because the killer's moonwalking too much and you like break line of sight long enough where if you decided to pre-throw a pallet, for example, you would still be able to get the aura reading effect. Um And the like gen info is also really nice because it has like a few different uses. Like you said, quick gambit was like one of the first things I thought of, and because of the HUD, you can know not only which gen has the most progress, but precisely how much. So it's like you don't want to bring the killer to the gen if it's at like a quarter, because they might just split off and start pressuring it, because they'll know you have to be pretty close for quick gambit. But if the gen's at like 3/4 and you start heading over there, by the time you get there, it's going to be at maybe 85-90%. You get the boost, and by the time the killer can even react and go and chase them off the gen, you've provided that little boost to like just muscle out the last little bit of generator. And also the fact that the effect persists, that like if the killer leaves you, you can know which objective has the most. So if you wanted to go and assist
it'll
with that
transfer
objective
to the next.
yeah, like
Once that gen is done, then it'll transfer like the next most.
Yeah,
gen
it gives
will
you
light
some
up.
information on like exactly which gen, like where the generator is with the most progress, so you can maybe go and try and assist, especially if it's like, you know, you only need one generator left or something like that, so you know like how to help out. It's a good perk. I don't even think it's like really like a niche perk. It's kind of like a just a strong info, like this with like windows and stuff, and like depending that way you have like know, you can see which way the killer's going if you throw a pallet, and then know exactly like which direction you need to go. If they're like mind gaming, you need to leave the tile or whatever the case may be. Like it's just an additional information while looping, which is like always extremely helpful.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
I think it's
I think
just
this is
solid.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah. One that I know that you want to talk about quite a bit is Made for This. Only activates when you're injured and not exhausted. So, similar to Iron Will, which is kind of what I initially thought to pair with this. So, you get a 3% haste effect, and after you finish healing health state from another survivor, you gain the endurance status effect for 10 seconds. I know that you've been really excited about this perk. You have some thoughts about it. Um, we were talking before we were recording about that endurance. So, and how to gain that. So I'll let you like start on your initial thoughts. My first thought was pairing this potentially with Iron Will and staying away from any kind of exhaustion perks, just to get value throughout the whole game. Maybe resilience as well. Um, but you know, you were playing around with this a bunch, and then we'll talk about that endurance status effect and how
Yeah.
it's maybe a little more nuanced than you might originally think.
Yeah, so like the haste, right, 3% at tier 3 is not insignificant by any means. I do know that there's a lot of people, particularly on the killer side, that are freaking out about the possibility of a survivor having 3% haste, even though we've had a boon in the game that gives you 2% haste and gives it team wide in like a pretty decent radius. And that's not an issue, but apparently 3% is. I don't really understand why people are freaking out. It's basically like half the haste that you get from one tier of Bloodlust, and then you already like outclass it. There's plenty of killers with movement. Like this, like the haste is not going to be very meaningful against killers like like all the top tiers, right? Anyone with really strong movement abilities, trap-based killers, doesn't really matter how fast you move. You can't go through something that just kills you. Like if an artist sets up a crow, if Trapper's got his traps down, hag, whatever, you're getting hit no matter what. Or with the new killer, right? With the singularity, it doesn't matter how it'll help a little bit, like a very slight amount, but because he can't be stunned temporarily when he teleports and can vault and kick faster, he's still going to close the distance regardless. Um, the I agree that Iron Will is pretty good, right? Because both of those perks basically say don't pair this with exhaustion. If you're gonna pair this with exhaustion, Dead Hard pops into mind because you can hold the Dead Hard, and in your first chase you won't have Dead Hard anyway, so you'll just be relying on this perk entirely. If you're gonna use another exhaustion, the one that I actually thought of was balanced, because you're not gonna be using it as often. If you're trying to run it with like Lithe and you want to like run with the 3% haste for as long as possible before being exhausted, you like can't do it with Lithe because you basically have to forego vaulting entirely. Otherwise, this Made for This haste doesn't do a thing. It doesn't work with sprint burst. It's like, I guess, like head on. Background player is kind of nice, but like it's
To be
like,
fair, it does work with sprint burst because you get the 3% haste while walking.
Yeah, crazy. Actually, I only, you say that, but I think when I was injured, if you're not, I think it's only when you're sprinting, because like the perk wasn't lit up when I would walk. But I don't
You
know if
know,
that's the case.
I wonder. So self-aware,
Right, is only when you're walking, but it gives the
right?
haste.
But does it say a haste amount? I think it just says you walk X% faster.
Yeah, I don't know. Because like anyway, if my thought is like if you really like hope, right? Hope has become like a pretty
You
popular
you
end game
walk
perk.
20% faster. So I
Okay.
don't think that it. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. But again, if you like hope, it's going to be really nice. People were trying to showcase like this with hope, and it's like, oh my god, you're 110. But it's like, okay, but without this perk, you're 107, which is like that's the 7% is much more impactful than the 3% from this perk.
And
Like
the 110 only happens during the in game.
yeah, and in the end game when you're injured. So like,
Right.
um, it's not gonna really like it doesn't synergize with like some of the most impactful other chase perks, which is good. It shouldn't, but I feel like I feel like you're running this in place of like a one-time massive speed boost like a sprint burst or a lithe. This perk also is, as we talked about earlier, like blood echo is going to shut down this perk very effectively. I don't know how else to frame it. Like if people are worried about this perk and if for whatever reason it really does become like crazy strong, I think it will be like relatively meta. I think it will be like something you see decently often. But if you're worried about it, you can just sub in Blood Echo, which is probably already a pretty like underrated perk to an extent. And it's not like it only shuts down this perk; it still exhausts other people. Um, there are plenty of ways that we just got the new exhaustion perk that we were talking about earlier. So if two people are injured and the person who's injured is like, I want to stay injured because I have made for this, so I'll just heal you and then I'll just stay injured. It's kind of like how with old dead hard people would just be like, well, I don't need to heal, I have like resilience dead hard, so I'll just stay injured. Blood Echo is gonna prevent that, so like you'll have to kind of heal up and then wait till you're injured again. Like I think it's going to be strong. I think it's the strongest of the three perks, but I don't think it's at a level where it's like problematic. I just think that we actually got like a decent perk and people are like not used to getting that for Survivor. If I'm going to be frank, it's just not something you usually
So
see.
so your hot take is that made for this is the strongest of these survivor perks. My hot take is that troubleshooter, the first one that we talked about, is actually the strongest.
I don't think that that's like that crazy. Honestly, I think Troubleshooter is like pretty damn good.
Uh the real hot take is the last perk, scavenger. Uh Killer mains all over the place are losing their fucking minds over this perk. And it's not that crazy. It's
It's
not that insane. It really isn't. So let's talk about it. So Scavenger says that while you're holding an empty toolbox, if you hit a great skill check, then you get a token. When you have 4 tokens and you're holding that empty toolbox, it refills once per trial. And then it also has the additional thing of you can rummage for a yellow toolbox similar to Residual Manifest or Pharmacy, that kind of stuff. So people, I will say Otstarva in particular, I'll throw his name out there. He's put out 2 videos about this perk already. The PTB has been available for like 2 days at this point. He's put out 2 videos about it. And he's saying that this is going to be game breaking, how you can save, 40 seconds each of the 4 survivors, and how this is going to break the game entirely. And that's just not the case. Subtle did some testing. I'll let you kind of talk about your experiences with it. But if you think about it, you have to use up the toolbox, which admittedly isn't that difficult. And then after it's done, completely done, then you have to hit 4 great skill checks, which means that you either have to earn it or you also have to be running stakeout and have been within the killer's terror radius for enough time to accrue stakeout tokens and not use them when you are using your toolbox, by the way.
Which is when you get more skill checks, by the way.
Which is when you get more skill checks. And then you have to hit 4 great skill checks, and then you refill it 1 time. Again, Subtle, talk about your experiences, and then we can talk about this more.
So I was trying to test for the secondary effect, and it was difficult just to get
just to be clear, you were testing that if you had consumed a toolbox, and then while it was empty, getting 4 great skill checks to then immediately refill it, would it still allow you to rummage for the toolbox? Because the perk says once it refills, then the perk deactivates. You were testing, does it still allow you to rummage the toolbox even though the perk has deactivated?
Yes,
just to give that context.
Yeah. And it does allow you to still rummage the yellow. That's an independent effect regardless of whether you've already burned through the refilling of a toolbox or not. But it took me forever to get I would use the toolbox, which would get me, I was trying to do it without charges, just to try to burn through the toolbox faster so I could burn the refill faster, and then I could go try to rummage. And it was difficult to get the toolbox to refill, because when you're not using a toolbox to repair, getting consistent skill checks is insanely difficult and, again, just inconsistent. If you've ever tried to run autodidact, for example, you know that trying to get a perk that's related around getting a bunch of skill checks and it doesn't trigger additional skill checks is not very reliable. And you're talking about burning your entire item slot and add-ons specifically for this purpose to get 1 extra use out of it. And for some reason, the idea that you don't need to go into a locker to refill it with build to last and you could just stay on the gen is the huge game-changing thing, which most gens are going to be relatively close to a locker. How many gens are inside a maze tile, like a jungle gym or an LT wall, which all have guaranteed lockers, so you just walk over and go in, and that's what, a 15-second, 12-second, a 15-second round trip, and you instantly get it and get the skill checks more often to fuel things like hyper focus with stakeout, which is going to save you more time. But if you're burning the stakeouts and you can't use a toolbox to generate the tokens, it takes a long time. I would literally use the toolbox, and even though it didn't have charges, it would be an engineer's, I would be done with it, and basically before a quarter gen was done, and I could not get it to give me 4 skill check opportunities by the time I was done on a gen solo.
So even if you hit the greats, you were not offered a lot of the time. You weren't even offered 4 skill checks.
Yeah, granted,
to get the greats.
Granted, I only did a couple of games with this, but it's not that consistent. And you're talking about the full upside being a 20-second time save on gens if you fully use the toolbox both times. And you have to use it with a toolbox as your item, so you can't use things like medkits or flashlights or bring a key or whatever the case may be. You can't use it. Has to be you bring in a toolbox.
And on top of that, if you are so you use the toolbox, you fully deplete it, you're now in the phase where it is empty and you're trying to get great skill checks. So first off, something that I needed to be reminded of because I wasn't really thinking about it. You get more skill checks when using the toolbox, but your toolbox is empty, so you are no longer getting more skill checks. Secondly, if you're actually hitting great skill checks, that's progressing the generator faster, which means there are then fewer opportunities for you to get skill checks to hit the greats in the first place. And then third off, you're dedicating your entire item, both of your add-ons, and at least one of your perks. People are talking about this with built to last, or this and stakeout, or this and stakeout and hyperfocus, or this and stakeout and hyperfocus and built to last. You're talking about your entire build, which means you're not going to be contributing to chase, you're not going to be contributing to info, you're not going to be contributing to any kind of healing speed ups or chases or anything. You are dedicated to only being on the generator. Your entire build is dedicated to that. And honestly, as a survivor player, a lot of the time, I do a lot of the gens in our group. everybody that plays with me kind of knows that. I'm not wanting more things to have me doing that more often, you know?
Yeah, like it's like clearly I think like a not very interesting perk because like it just like more toolbox, like cool, I guess. But like I don't even understand like the time save compared to the resource dedication. Like think of all the time you can save. Just like it's not like gens are the only thing that you use. Like you can save time with an exhaustion perk. Like think about how much time an exhaustion perk buys a whole team from one proc of sprint burst, one proc of lithe in a chase, something like that. How about like heal speeds, right? Like will make it if you're just healing one person is saving you 8 seconds on a heal, and that's if they're not mangled. Like think of how often people run sloppy or mangled add-ons, and you're saving even more time. And that's for each heal that you do, which you're probably doing multiple per match. You get two heals basically with will make it, and it's about the exact same. It's a little bit less of a time save than what you would get for the entire duration of the match by getting an extra use from your toolbox. And that's one
And
perk slot. Like,
and just to be clear, like this perk accounts for one extra use of the toolbox, which equates to somewhere between at peak loadout, somewhere between like 15 and 20 seconds.
yeah, depending on like how exactly what and auto combination and toolbox combination you use.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about a 20-second time save, one time per match. Now, granted, if that 20 seconds completes a generator, then that generator is done. It can't be undone. The killer can't like kick it to break the generator. That is locked in. And I acknowledge that. But, like you were saying, one sprint burst to occupy the killer's time more during a chase, one well-placed lithe, dead hard when, I mean, even still, current dead hard, even in its nerf state, can occupy the killer's time just as much, if not longer, after one use, and dead hard can have two uses. Like, I think that the people that are losing their mind are insane and just have not thought about what that actually means.
Yeah, like think about how much. I mean, think about how much time if we're playing in our Swift, how much time one flashlight save like can completely reverse a game with, and that's 1 second of use on an item that starts by default at the lowest rarity item with no add-ons, where you can use it 8 times, and people are like. And I get that, like, yes, it's harder to earn a flashlight save compared to just sitting on a gen, but like it's just not nearly as crazy. And like you said, there are plenty of times in matches that like yes you're going to probably do gens at some point, but that you're going to do enough gens to use the whole toolbox and then have to get 4 great skill checks when you're not getting the increased likelihood of seeing skill checks, and then use the whole toolbox again. There's plenty of matches where you will not get perk value. You might not even get initial toolbox value if you get found. Like, lethal is a plenty common perk. Corrupt intervention is going to prevent you from just jumping on a gen at the beginning a good amount of the time and help you get found. There's so many times you're going to have to spend time going for unhooks. Like, unless you're really just going to be the full, like, gens before friends, like, motto of, I'm only going to sit on gens. I'm not going to be the person that unhooks. I'm not going to heal teammates. I'm literally just going to commit for this extra 20 seconds at max, like, time save for this perk. Like, I guess, but you're probably going to be making poor decisions, and you're, again, like you said, you're dedicating perk slots, if not multiple perk slots. You're weakening the other areas of the game that you could boost by running other perks like heal speed and chase perks.
And I mean, I don't do this very often, but there have been plenty of times where I have run like a toolbox with a brand new part. And anybody who's done that has had the situation many times where you dump your brand new part into a generator, and then the killer goes over, chases you off of it, kicks it, it starts regressing, and now you've gotten no value out of your brand new part. The upside for a brand new part is huge. The potential theoretical upside for this entire perk is like less than a brand new part.
Yeah, and it doesn't synergize with brand new parts because you have to dedicate like a slot
to
to it.
have the best
yeah, to have the
toolbox to utilize it, you can't be running a brand new part because you need charges or repair speed.
Yeah, running like literally running a brand new part over running like the optimal other the thing to optimize the perk usage is still saving you more time than the perk. And don't get me wrong, neither of us are saying brand new parts are really balanced. Like they're obviously problematic and shouldn't be in the game. If you want to talk about nerfing toolboxes and you have an issue with toolboxes, I guess, but like the perk for a full perk slot is not getting that much value that or consistent value that it's like completely destroying Dead by Day, like the fabric of Dead by Daylight as we know it. Like that is the kind of outrage that we've generally seen. It honestly reminds me somewhat of the outrage that people were expressing over Blood Rush, thinking that like this thing is ridiculous. You get to use 2 sprint bursts in a row. Like, how is this going to be counterable? Like, you just can't be caught. And no one runs the perk, which I said I literally, like, I was out in front of when it was like announced on the PTB. I was like, this perk is shit. It's way too niche. You're not going to get value. I don't think this is as nearly niche, but like, it's similar to the same kind of outrage where like this perk is not that game changing. I don't think people are really thinking through how matches play out. Like you said, like you can burn a toolbox and then get hit with pain res, and then goodbye, your whole toolbox and more is gone. So like one proc of a killer perk just completely annihilates your entire like build basically, which is just like it
invalidates more than just that one perk, because especially if you're talking about and let's not oh my god, let's talk about Franklin's.
I was just gonna say, what about Franklin's? Like, okay, like hit and run killer with Franklin's. I get like, okay, well now you've committed your full build and it doesn't do anything, and you can't heal from the hit and run wraith, and you can't loop, you can't sprint burst away from the like. Okay, I guess you did it. Like. You're gonna get shit on by like bad killers just because you like tried to gen rush. Like, yes, I guarantee you, we're going to see content creators with a 4-man Swift, and it's going to be all of the faces that you normally know, and they're going to go, and they're going to find a baby killer who, like, can't chase for shit, and everyone's just like, gen rush, gen rush, gen rush. They don't get hits at all, so there's no actual map pressure, and they're just doing the gens as fast as they humanly can, and they're going to be like, world's record, we finished a match in 2.5 minutes. See, crazy.
But I don't actually think that's going to happen, because if it's a baby killer, then you're using your toolbox, you're hitting your great skill checks. That's the same. Like, I don't think that this really speeds it up that much.
Can't you already just do that with like 4 brand new parts? Like, doesn't that basically already do this and more? Like, I just don't understand how this perk changes anything. Like, it doesn't do, it's just not that, like, I don't know how many other ways that we could like try to frame it. It's just like, it's not as good as you think it is. It's not going to do the things that you think it is. People were freaking out about hyper focus and stakeout, being like, oh, this completely changes the formula on how fast gens go. I play killer plenty. I'm Eerie 1 like every season. I like never see anyone run hyper focus stakeout ever. And even when they do, the matches go terribly for them anyway. It doesn't, I never am like, oh my god.
Yeah, because half their build is dedicated to one thing.
Yeah, never am I like, oh my god, if only they didn't have hyper-focused stakeout, I could have like actually gotten a 4K. Like, bro, they're getting like 2 or 3 gens done a match at tops. That's like a good game. And I'm running no slowdown, and you're worried about like a 20-second boost if it's maximally used, like, and dedicating other perks on top of that and your items. Like, I was more worried. Granted, medkits have been nerfed, but medkits scare me a hell of a lot more in terms of relieving pressure than people sitting on a gen. People who have good chase perks scare me a lot. Like, people who use Lithe and can just take distance or sprint burst away and I can't get the initial hit, that's way more terrifying to me than doing gens. If my chases are efficient, I'm really not worried about how fast they're doing gens. And doing the early gens is like the least important part of the game. Like, who cares if 3 people team up on a gen at the beginning and oh my god, they did that first gen in like 20 seconds. It's like, okay. And the reason why Skull Merchant is like so oppressive is because you can't get the last gen. Like, if you're using the toolbox to try to get the second use, like, I guess you're just gonna hold it forever, but then they can just keep regressing it with perks, and then it's dead. Like, your perk and the whole build is dead and you can't do anything. So like, I just
this perk is not this perk is not bad, don't get me wrong. But people need to calm the fuck down. It is not that good. It is crazy not that
Yeah,
good.
like I'm
Like
not.
it blows my mind that Otz has put out 2 videos in 2 days about this.
You know what I'm
It's
excited?
crazy to
You know
me.
what I'm excited about with this perk is it lets me do those like stupid tome challenges that are like deplete 50 toolboxes. Like, okay, cool, I can fully deplete a toolbox like like extra, and I can run built to last to even deplete it further. Like that's what I'm happy about. Like I'm not gonna run this perk not because I think it's too good. I just don't think it's that good, and it's not interesting on top of it. And if anything, I'm more interested in like if I'm going to do a Sabo build and having the ability to like replenish it while I do a gen or something, and now I have like more Sabo charges, that's way like Sabo can again getting like completely resetting a down survivor's state and giving them distance is insanely impactful, and probably more impactful than one like full depletion of a toolbox on a gen. Like that's going to change a game way more than your bit of time save if you even get to use it.
Yeah. Well,
And
welcome
rant.
to our TED Talk. TED Talk.
Yeah.
Tell us down below how fucking stupid we are.
Yeah.
This perk is not crazy.
Yeah.
All right. Last major thing, new addition is the map. Initial thoughts, like the map is quite large. It's extremely dense. It's kind of hard to navigate. There's some weird new tiles where there's like some ramps, and I don't know. It's very bizarre. Um, Initial thought, I think that this new map, in particular, the main building is like really good for Survivor. I think it's really good for Survivor.
Yeah, I think that like the surrounding like tiles that are outside of the building aren't as crazy. Like it's nice that there's like a concentrated area that's like it's not nice, I would say, but like at least it isn't like where I think of like Badham, where like everywhere you go is just like laden with really crazy loops. But like it still is going to be survivor sided, and like it's cluttered, and that wouldn't even be that bad to me if it didn't have such a horrid like impact on certain killers powers. Like the chainsaw killers, like I've seen a billion clips collide on things that you can walk through. Like I don't understand why you're colliding on like
The
leaves.
grass at
Yeah,
Shack.
like why are you colliding on things that don't have like collision when you walk? It just shouldn't be a thing. I don't understand. Billy literally can't chainsaw through the doorways at Shack because the ceiling is too low. Granted, they'll probably change that. That seems like a pretty easy thing to change. I hope that that's like a more map wide thing, because like Billy is literally not playable on the map. Um, it seems like there's really stupid collisions for hatchets as well. For Huntress, there's gonna be plenty of killers that probably don't get too impacted. I could see like
I was gonna say like Demo with his shreds, similar to Huntress,
yeah, I could see
and probably Blight too.
yeah, Blight's weird because like I don't really know. Yeah, there'd have to be experimenting because I don't know what you can like avoid collision on. Like every texture has like weird ways to.
Granted, the collision for that map is just bizarre.
Yeah, I hope that they like hopefully that's like the early stage of it, and maybe they'll touch it up. It seems like it's getting pretty decent attention from how bad the collision is, so optimistically they'll actually address it before live, or maybe shortly after it goes live, so we don't have to deal for it too, like for too long. Main building's like weird. It doesn't have like any like one loop that's like really insane. It's got like the lower of the two. It's like a weird 3-story building, but it's like the first floor of it is like
No,
a
there's like really
raised.
4
Yeah, it's like the ground level,
floors.
and then there's a second floor, and then you go up like another staircase, and there's a third floor, and then there's a roof on top of that that you can
It's
like
really
jump up.
weird.
It's very bizarre. There's like a pallet with a window that lets you like vault out of the building if you're looping it in the correct way, which could be pretty good. The drop off windows from like the roof seem pretty good. We were testing like can you try to cut them off, and it seems like there's some pallet that spawns like sort of underneath the building. There's
Hmm.
like the ground is kind of like dug out and goes under, and there's a
It's like an
pallet that
underpass.
yeah, there's like a pallet that spawns pretty close to it. So once that's gone,
Like
you're
right
getting a
in the
hit.
middle of the main building
Yeah,
underneath.
like once you use that up, those windows are not nearly as strong, but like you can still loop for a pretty long time. So like yeah, it's
Yeah,
gonna be annoying, I think, for
we
Killer to be
tested
sure.
that. We tested that, and he was able to vault out that window. I even like prematurely cut out the door and went down, and he was able to get cleanly to that pallet.
Without
Um,
balanced or lithe or any like speed boost at all, like just base survivor speed.
yeah, so for me, like the the strength of the main building is definitely not on its defined loops because other than that one pallet in the window that you mentioned before, there isn't anything that's particularly clean as far as looping it goes. But what there is you go to this drop off and then you drop off and there's three different directions that the survivor can go. And so you have to mind game that. And then there's another area that they can go down. And then there's, two or three or even four different paths that the survivor can go. So you're constantly having to try and track them. And if you slip up for a second on breaking line of sight or, you know, you don't have aura reading or something like
Lightweight.
that, yeah, they can get crazy distance. And like you said, that doesn't include balance landing, which it would not be an episode of this podcast if I didn't talk about it. Balance landing makes that building insane. It is wild. Like you can't throw a diversion pebble without finding something to balance off of in that place.
Yeah,
Like
there's
it's insane.
yeah, like it feels like that building, especially like the rooftop, was like built for balanced landing in mind. Like there's a place where you can run off, and then there's also just a vault that kind of like makes you drop kind of like a Thompson house, that one window that drops you out onto the porch a little bit, like right
Right.
when you go up the
Yeah.
stairs. It's kind of similar to that, where like on its own it's not that strong, but with balance it just becomes like a crazy way to proc and just gain insane distance.
And again,
So
with balanced, you're able to, drop down onto one of these areas that has three different paths that you can go down and you're gone.
yeah.
You're not getting caught.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Like I could just see it as one of those maps where like survivors try to bring map offerings and do like balanced landing, maybe even like dance with me if you're like dropping off, because of how easy it is to like get confused with all of the
Mhm.
different pathways that like people are gonna. It's good. Like I hate when maps are like used in a way that people try to abuse it. Even like I'm not
Lucky
really
Break seems crazy with that too.
Lucky Break 2. I didn't really see what the hook
Yeah,
layout was in the
for
building,
boil
so I'm worried
over.
about boil over.
Yeah.
But it like that could be it's tricky, right? Because like you don't want to put a hook on the roof and then you're worried about like killers just being able to body block going, because there's only like one way up.
One way, yeah.
But hopefully like because there's like the third
Maybe on
floor
like the
and then
third.
yeah, like right
Yeah.
inside there has to be like a very accessible, probably like couple of hooks, because if like a full team brings it, you just like can't hook
Sabo.
people. Yeah,
Sabo
Sabo too.
breakdown.
But like
Yeah.
most
I
of the
mean
loops are fine. It's just the building probably needs to be toned down a bit.
the main building is insane. With how cluttered the map is, I think that it may be pretty strong for Hag, because it's harder. It's much easier to place traps and have them not be visible. Um, Trapper similarly, except it's much easier to see his traps than Hag's traps. They'll definitely stand out more on the terrain, but it doesn't matter how much they stand out if you're going up a ramp and you drop down and it's right there, like you never had the chance to see it in the first place.
Yeah, it's like kind of like the design is like kind of like the opposite of like a cold wind map, right? Where you have these like, granted there's corn everywhere, but like you can run and stand anywhere in the field, but like even the like field part of the map where you're away from the building is like kind of like a indoor map where everything has like narrow passages, so you're kind of like funneled
You can
into
see down.
picking a path instead of just like having like a wide range where you're like free. Like I think of like right if you're dodging like a ranged killer, you can kind of like weave back and forth. You don't really like have that on a lot of the spots because there's just like trees and rocks and the ramps and like all these stuff that like you have to pick like a narrow lane to just like it's like a labyrinth around
Yeah,
the map.
with how many line of sight blockers there are, I would imagine that Huntress, Trickster, Slinger, even Nurse probably don't like this map. Um, and again, that's completely disregarding the main building. That's just talking about
Hmm.
like the dense forest area.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks amazing, and there's some weird sounds and like shadows of creatures and stuff like that. It looks and sounds really cool and immersive, but as far as gameplay wise goes, I'm not sold on this.
Yeah, I'm not really sold on it either. I feel like the collision is the thing that like worries me the most. Just because like you just don't want killers to feel like they can't use their power at all. But if they can clean that up a little bit, it probably won't be people's favorite map, but it shouldn't be like trauma inducing. As far as
Yeah,
like survivors just spamming the offering for that, like the way they do like on like Garden
Garden
of
of Joy.
Joy, yeah,
Yeah,
Borgo, stuff like that.
yeah. Uh, Lastly, we had some other changes go through. Notably, Pop Goes the Weasel increases from 20% of the gen's current progress to 30%. I think that's totally reasonable. Um, I wanted to I didn't do this, but I thought about doing the math of Pop used to be 25% of the overall gen progress, and now it's 30% of the current progress. Thinking about what percent the gen would need to be for that to be equivalent. I don't know what that would be. Also, at that point, gens were 80 seconds and now they're 90. Regardless, I think that that's totally fine. Like, Pop was seeing less and less play. I think that this is a sizable but not overbearing buff to it.
Yeah, the fact that it's still the current progress, like the quick math is that it adds like if you're at half progress on a gen, you're adding you're only getting half of that extra 10% value, so you're only getting like 5% extra from the gen, which is like 4 seconds extra of worth of progress that gets regressed, which is like, if you're using it several times a match, like that could add up, and obviously that scales even better at the really high percents. It's just like a slight it really is like a slight tweak, and it's not going to feel like too oppressive, but it makes a perk that it kind of like slid in usage because of the like meta change last summer to be like
Yeah, like if you think
more
about a
more
gen
useful.
being at literally 100%, that would be 90 seconds. So this extra 10% would result in 9 seconds. But um, I don't know. That doesn't. It seems good. Like I am more likely to run Pop than I did before with this change. But as a survivor, I'm not like, oh fuck, it did an extra 3 seconds of regression. My match is over.
Yeah, it's like it's capped at if a gen is literally 99% at regressing an extra, like you said, like 9%, 9 seconds worth, and it's probably going to be on average somewhere closer to like 4 or 5 on average, which is not that insane.
Yeah. And again, with Pop, it's something that you have to earn. You have to get the down, you have to get the hook, and then you have to go out of your way to go and kick the gen, and it's based off of the current progress.
And it's only
It's
one
fine.
it's only one gen at a time too, unlike like Jolt or something that or Eruption that can proc and hit multiple.
Yeah.
So
There were some add-on changes to Artist, Nemesis, and Trickster. Nothing really to talk about. Nothing too meaningful. I made a joke when the thing went live about the Trickster's extra zero point 0.2 seconds of main event per knife hit if you're running both of the add-ons now.
yeah, which is just
It's whatever.
yeah. There's nothing. The honestly of all of the add-ons that of those were touched, the Artist one that gave you an extra crow, but they would stay or reduce. I forget. I think it's add a crow, and then it
Mhm.
reduces. Like they stay out for longer. The amount that they stay on the ground is reduced slightly, so you can like the power can start recharging a little bit faster, which is like a nice buff. But like I feel like I almost never see artists use that add-on in the first place. Maybe that changes with this, probably not.
Yeah.
Artists would know probably better, but I feel like those are like severed hands and the recharge and the longer repel, those are still gonna like stand out from the rest.
Yep. So there is a change to Pinhead, but it's kind of indirectly. So with this PTB, they added the idea of like item slots. So there will be the items that survivors can bring into the matches. So your toolboxes, your medkits, your keys, your maps, and your flashlights and firecrackers. Then there will be a second one for temporary items. This goes along with flashbangs, the white glyph when you take that and then turn that in, and then one for the special killer power ones, including the tapes for Sadako, the cube for Pinhead, and that's really what we're talking about here. So previously on live servers right now, as a Pinhead, if somebody takes your cube and you have Franklin's Demise on and you hit them, the cube drops and you start a chain hunt. Now on the PTB, you hit them with Franklin's, they drop their held item that they brought in or got from a chest. So their medkit, their key, their map, whatever. It does not make them drop the box. It does still work with Hoarder. So when they take the box, they'll still get the notification with Hoarder if you're in range, but it will not drop the box with Franklin's. And that's a pretty notable change. When I play Pinhead, I run Hoarder. I do not run Franklin. I think that it's pretty overkill to run both. And I just personally think that Hoarder is better for my playstyle. But this is a big change, and I know a lot of Pinheads do run, and that's a really massive nerf, I would say, to Pinhead. I still think the killer is incredibly strong, and incredibly underrated by the community, but this is a big deal.
Yeah, it will affect people who were using Franklin's in their build. I think Hoarder, I agree with you, I think is probably the better of the two in terms of its strength and synergizing with Pinhead's power, but not needing to down a survivor and only needing to M1 them, and even if they're healthy, is a pretty like noticeable thing. But again, you're dedicating a perk slot to that, and Pinhead, in my opinion, pretty good at getting downs anyway. So like you probably don't even need the Franklins a lot of the time if you're particularly good. But it
Well,
is
thank
it
you.
is noticeable, yeah. But it is noticeable. It also with the EMPs, right? Doesn't we says it doesn't make you drop the EMPs either, so that can't be used with
Right.
the
It
singularity
does not.
either.
It doesn't work with the EMP. So Franklin's doesn't make you drop the EMPs. It doesn't make you drop um, the cube. It doesn't make you drop the videotapes from Sadako. We didn't test the white glyph because I don't know if there's a good way to test that in a
Yeah,
custom.
in the you can't really do
I
it
don't
on
know if
the
it's. I don't know if it's possible. Oh
you
well.
can't even do it on the PTB because you can't use the tomes, so you can't
Hmm.
do tomes with it. So we'd have to wait till live. I haven't done my White Cliff challenge, so I guess we could test that.
I don't particularly want to find it out in a live match during
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when I'm holding the white glyph. I would rather just take the 45k.
Exactly. Yeah.
But regardless, like those aren't affected by it. We didn't test flashbang though, did we? I
I
would
don't think
assume.
so. I would
I,
guess you don't drop it, but
see, I would assume that you. Man, now I don't know.
yeah, because
We'll
if
have
it's
to
not,
test that.
yeah, I was like, if you're not dropping the EMP or the box,
But they're
it
in
makes
different inventory
they are
slots,
different
right?
slots. Yeah, I guess it's just whether that second, like, there's the main slot, the killer slot, and then there's like the temporary survivor item in
Yeah,
the middle, and it's like, where does Franklin's get cut off? I'm not
and
really
we
sure.
did test. So Subtle had an item and an EMP. The first hit made him drop his item, his flashlight, I think. And then when he just had the EMP and I hit him, or when he just had the cube, Franklin's did not make him drop either of those. So it's not like it prioritizes the first hit dropping the regular item and then the second hit drops the like killer power item. It just doesn't affect the killer item.
Hmm.
But we didn't test flashbangs, so
Yeah,
that's
that's the
that's
only
something we
thing.
can test.
Yep.
Ghostface got a couple buffs, so he moves zero point 0.2 meters per second faster while crouched. So he did move at 3.6 meters per second. Now he's moving at 3.8 meters per second while crouched. Uh, sure. I mean,
I
Ghostface is not a top killer, so I'm fine with him getting a
Yeah, and
buff.
like
It's fine.
crouching is like a way to like mind game at some of the like lower like junk loops. I think like McMillan, like with all the boxes or something, and like doing the crouch thing is kind of fun, but it's like whatever. You're still slower than Survivor. It just allows you to mind game and not lose as much distance if you catch them slipping, which is cool.
What I did think was pretty crazy is that your Night Shroud recovery, what currently on live is 24 seconds to refill and is now going to 20 seconds. Especially with how, like, if that was a one-time thing, oh boy, 4 seconds, that's whatever. But you're doing that constantly throughout the match. So I liken this kind of to, you know, almost to having a built-in Iron Maiden where, you're constantly going to refill your hatchets or your knives. So you're doing that faster. You're constantly getting your power back faster at base kit. I think that that's like a really impactful change and is going to make Ghostface stronger. I don't know if it's to the point where we'll see more Ghostface, but I mean, the Ghostface mains are very happy about that change.
Yeah, I think it does close the gap a little bit between the base kit and then the add-ons that like auto replenish when you break a pallet or break a wall, right?
Sure.
Because that just basically
It
ignores.
indirectly makes them a little worse because you're not
Yeah,
as
compared
reliant on that.
exactly. So like maybe that encourages more diverse add-on use because you're getting your power back a little bit faster by default. We'll see how that transpires in live games and whether Ghostfaces feel like that's something that they can do and relinquish using those other add-ons. But I think anything that buffs like normal base kit instead of just trying to balance a killer around its add-ons is probably a healthier way to go most of the time.
I mean, most of the time that I go against Ghostface, I don't even see those add-ons. It's more like the Philly to reduce the amount of time that it takes to stalk a survivor, and like the drop leg knife sheath where it gets increased movement speed after stalking a survivor. I don't see the ones that get the power back as frequently,
I
especially
feel like I
like
see the
the
kick one a decent amount, but I know there's other ones where like when you down a marked survivor, you like instantly recharge. That I don't
Mhm.
really see, like specifically the kick one if I'm seeing any of those, but um again, I think closing the gap between those is never a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost always in favor of closing the gap between the top killers and the bottom killers. And Ghostface isn't like a bottom killer, but he's certainly in the bottom half, and
Hmm.
bringing him closer to that middle area, I think, is a welcome change. And again, like Ghostfaces are not upset about this change at all. There were also some add-on buffs, nothing too major to talk about. The biggest buff for a killer in this update is absolutely Pyramid Head. So, as it stands on live server right now, the only way that you can inflict torment on a survivor is to use your power and drag the spaghetti sauce through the ground and then have the survivor walk or run through it. Uh, there's counterplay where you can crouch, and if you're like on the ground crawling, then you won't get infected. But if you're walking or if you're running, particularly at a loop or like at a pallet or a window, it's very easy to get the torment in those cases. But getting that set up is really hard. Um, there was a pretty long period of time where like Pyramid Head was who I was thinking of maining, and in all of the time that I played him, it wasn't very frequent that I was getting a meaningful number. Now, you still have that way of inflicting torment, but in addition, if you hit somebody with your power, the actual shot, they get tormented also. And that's a huge change and a massive buff to an already top tier killer. Um, Now it's a lot easier to get people tormented, so you can bypass the um, unhook perks such as Deliverance, such as Will Make It, which you were talking about before. Uh, there's a lot of things that just bypass unhook endurance, DS,
Off the
off the
record.
record. All of these are off the table against Pyramid Head because it's so free for you to get tormented now.
Yeah, I think off the record is like the one that jumps out to me from like the survivor standpoint that like gets ignored, and deliverance. Those are like the two big ones, just because DS isn't like nearly as prevalent. But uh yeah, it doesn't change how strong he is in chase. It just allows him to like tunnel more effectively and bypass perks. I don't know, it might discourage pyramid heads from using killer related perks that like are requiring you to get hooks, like a pain resonance or something like that.
Well,
But it could
maybe
also,
because the choice is in your hands.
right,
If
because
if
pain
I'm
res,
running, yeah, if I'm running pain res, I can still keep that survivor tormented and get the pain res proc, and then save their torment for later. That being said, now that it's easier to torment survivors, it's more likely that they will untorment by pulling out somebody from a cage. But then you just re-torment them again by using your power.
right.
It's fine.
Yeah, I think what this changes in terms of gameplay is, like you said, like the whole W, right? Like running away from loops where, you know, you go into a loop, the pyramid head the first time around drags their power behind you to set to like put the trail in the loop. So that way, if you decide to loop it again, you get tormented. A lot of times, survivors, even if it would risk getting, like, especially if you were healthy, getting injured, that seemed like a worthwhile trade off to getting tormented. Now, since you can get tormented just from getting hit, you probably don't even care about running through the trail the way that
Mm-hmm.
you used to. Like, that isn't nearly as meaningful. But yeah, especially now that you can also relieve like getting rid of the torment more frequently, because there's probably going to be an uptick in how often survivors get sent to the cages as well because of the M2 change. Uh it's a crazy, like, Pyramid Head is like solidly a top 10 killer, like just spitballing, I think.
Unquestionably a
Yeah,
top 10 killer.
I don't even know exactly where I would put it, but like clearly a top 10. So a pretty noticeable buff in a way that isn't very interesting. Like it helps him tunnel, which is like not really what I feel like we should be encouraging, and like something, I don't know. I don't really feel
In
like
an
it's a,
ideal world, so like, I've talked before how I play killer. I completely steer away from camping and tunneling. Even in that case, like you're making it freer to bypass certain perks, but those perks are meant to prevent the thing that you're already choosing not to do, so you don't really have much incentive to not do that anyway. I don't know. The, as opposed to the ghost face change where you're bringing a lower tier killer up to the middle, you're propelling a high tier killer even further up. You're giving them more tools available to them. Uh, I'm not even saying this like as an entitled survivor main. I think that this is the opposite direction that they should be going. I want to bring killers more toward the middle, and this ain't it.
yeah, I just don't feel like Pyramid Head's a killer that like struggles either. So like I just don't even understand, I don't even understand why Tinker, like, he's actually like in a pretty good spot. Like, to me, he's kind of around where like the best killers should probably be, like
Mhm.
ballpark wise. So buffing him doesn't make a lot of balance sense to me. And again, like, if it was a more interesting change, um I would be down, but it just like promotes less interesting like flow of the game and play style. So um I don't really, like I said with Ghostface, happy when they buff base kit stuff for killers that need it rather than go in the add-on direction. Pyramid Head could use an add-on pass, and that would probably be a healthier change to give some like more utility. But this is like not something he needs. There's so many other killers that need love, and other like high tiers that need to be like brought back to the rest of the
Okay,
pack. So
here's my idea for the add-on pass for Pyramid Head. You ready? Iridescent 1, this effect. Iridescent 2 increases Pyramid Head's booty size by 300%.
yeah.
Double
Perfect.
Eerie every game.
It does this effect does feel like an iridescent add-on. I would agree with that assessment. It definitely feels like a really
Yeah,
strong,
and if this were an iridescent add-on, it would be this in range every game.
yeah. Oh yeah, no question.
Unquestionably.
Yeah, it would just be the green range with this. Yeah, not even a question. But now it's just going to be this base kit
and
with
double
double range.
range.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
like I don't understand how this helps solve any problems. It just makes him more problematic.
yeah.
If that's where you would classify him, I don't really see how this I don't really see who benefits from this. Even
Yeah,
like
that's
a
the
lot of
thing. Prior to this change, he was very strong, but to use your word, he wasn't problematic. Like,
there were
he
ways
had
to
to
deal
kind
with
of,
it. Yeah.
yeah, he had to kind of earn the torment because it wasn't the easiest thing to get on a survivor, and the reward was very high. You get to bypass off the record, DS, deliverance, all of these other perks. You get to have control over whether you hook them or whether you cage them in terms of the perks that you're running, the distance away from maybe other survivors if you have info on where they are. He was very strong, but he wasn't problematic. I think that's a really good place to be, and he's adding something, or they're adding something that might make him problematic.
Yeah, he also just now gets the like Wesker treatment of like getting downs with his power now means he doesn't have to worry about like flashlights or pallet saves pretty much, or like worried about like people getting slugged for any meaningful amount of time because you can just quickly cage and move on. You don't have to worry about someone crawling away and getting setting up for power struggle or
Yeah,
unbreakable things like that. So like he just like shuts down a lot of game plans against him that like were kind of necessary for dealing with how like pretty strong he is. And now he just like you just don't bother hovering, I guess, anymore for like flashlights and sabos and stuff because he's gonna have the option to cage pretty much every time.
yeah. Uh, Last thing that we really wanted to talk about was the change to deja vu. Uh, so as it is on live servers right now, at the start of a match or when a generator is finished, the three gens that are closest by each other will light up for 60 seconds, and you'll work on those generators within those three gens 5% faster. Now, instead of being 60 seconds, it's indefinite. So you'll always know where the three closest gens are if you have deja vu on. And instead of being 5%, it's 6% faster. So not much of a difference change on how much faster you're working on them. A welcome change. Deja vu doesn't really see any play, so making it better is fine. Um, but from a more macro standpoint, they address specifically that they're trying to use this as kind of a temporary band-aid fix for 3-gen playstyles. And the fact that you'll see where the 3-gen is throughout the entire match and be able to break those up just a little bit faster, I think is fine. I don't think that this is gonna like far from become any kind of a meta perk. You're still probably not ever gonna see it, but it's a little better. It's fine.
Honestly, I probably will end up running it a decent amount just because like I tried it when they first added the speed boost, but the issue is that the 60-second timer was the only time you could get the increased gen speed. Now
True.
you just
And the
always get
travel
the gen
time
speed.
contributed to that, and
Exactly. Like now you're just always getting the now 6% speed boost whenever you're doing those three gens, which are the most important gens to target. I don't think like the speed is anything that's so insane that it's gonna change like really annihilate the three gens or like really change like the equation as far as like gen speeds go, but it's a nice little buff. And especially if you're like coupling it with like two people with deja vu and like a proof thyself, like that starts to add up a little bit and you can start getting through those gens pretty quickly and breaking three gens rather effectively, especially if the killer like doesn't figure out right off the bat which
why
three
did you
gen is.
talk about deja vu and prove thyself but not scavenge?
Yeah. Scavenger. But it's a nice change, and I wish that more like the I like the change to deja vu, and I like the change to pop. I just wish like why couldn't you just do three perks for both sides and change it? Like I just would just give us more like simple things like this that don't like change the entire equation. It's not a meta shakeup, but just like
I
let
will
us use
agree
some
with
perks.
that in terms of like execution, but I do think that the fact that they specifically called out that this was to be a band-aid fix for the 3-gen issue is not insignificant. Like, it's
Yes.
very clearly on their radar and a priority that they're looking at. So in execution, yes, this is a very small change, but in terms of like the overall mentality of how they're looking at the game, I do think that that's a big deal and a good sign that
Yeah,
they're taking this
Skull
seriously.
Merchant rework, Skull Merchant rework, please.
The very last thing that we need to talk about at all is we actually got to use the perk search bar. I called it. It's so good.
Yeah, it is
It's very
though.
flexible. I honestly, the best use that I've had for it so far is search Soma, and it pulls up the 3 perks for Gabriel Soma, or Singularity, or Singu, or it's very flexible on what it picks up. It's just like how a search bar should be, executed very well. All you haters and doubters, come on now.
I, this is the second
Yeah,
like
speak up for yourself.
no, I was saying this is the second time that like, oh, these kind of quality of life things like the blood web change, right? The blood web speed are not, really like 3 in a row, right? If you're talking about like the way they've reworked the blood web like economy, and then also reworked with the auto blood web, and then now
and
the search bar
and the visual heartbeat
too. I was also going to say the having multiple loadouts set up per character. Like they've honestly done, like this is probably like I would say hands down the area of the game that has improved dramatically. Like there's so like going through menus and blood webbing and re-equipping and unequipping like perks and stuff was such a frustrating like time sink, and that's like almost entirely alleviated. Like I don't even know what, like I don't even have anything off the top of my head other than like give us like 5 loadouts per character. I don't know, like having more loadouts couldn't hurt.
The only complaint that I have is if I have the blood, or not the blood web, the perk loadout window open, I want to be able to type immediately, and it types into the search bar.
Yeah.
I don't like that I have to click on the search bar and then type, because the only other place that you're typing is in the like pregame lobby, and I would rather have it default to the search bar if I've got that window open.
Yeah, maybe like a setting that like lets you set priority for like text field or something like that could be like a really easy fix for that or something, so it defaults to that.
Yeah, but I
even
mean,
that's like
it's good.
yeah, it's better.
I'm nitpicking about 1 extra click. Like
yeah.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely like super impressed. So like those things they've been knocking out of the park for sure. To my surprise. You predicted it, to my surprise.
I was gonna eat my shoe if they were like, yeah, it only searched for the names of the.
Yeah, I literally thought you were gonna have to like know how to spell the full perk to like be able to search, or at least like a full word of like the multi-word
that doesn't
perk.
sound like the behavior.
The fact that you could literally do like a character's name, or literally just like hook. You could type in hook and it'll just like come up. I think I saw like a screenshot actually. I can't remember which content creator it was that like for some reason if you do like palette, if you search like palette as killer, bamboozle pops up, and bamboozle is under like window, so like that's like I guess like mislabeled in the system.
I can test this right now live. Hold on. But that's really funny.
But other than like that, other than like reclassify, and that's like something they could easily like fine tune behind the scenes to make it even better over time. But
oh no, I can read it for you. It does have palette in it. Blah 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 blah. Only one vault location may be blocked in this way at any time. The vault location is blocked only for survivors. Does not affect pallets.
But I think if you search window, I'm pretty sure if you search window, it like doesn't come up.
Oh, okay.
You might have to search like vault or something like that. I don't know if that's
okay,
what
yeah. Bamboozle doesn't come up with
with window. Yeah. So okay, so it comes up under palette because of
the perk description for some reason does not say window. This is going back to our previous episode where we were talking about how dog shit some of the descriptions are. It doesn't. It says performing a vault action calls upon the entity to block that vault location. Yeah, but it doesn't. But it doesn't affect pallets. That leaves only windows. Why
Yeah,
doesn't it just say that?
you know what it is? It's probably that they don't. It's probably not something that they label as the proper term that they probably use is vault. It's probably pallets or vaults, and the community has just like adopted calling it Windows. Because I
No,
don't.
because when you're a survivor and you're by a pallet, it says vault. The prompt is vault.
Right, but I'm saying, I guess if you're doing the vault, I'm just talking about what the way they classify windows. They might just call them vaults rather than pallets. Like I'm trying to think of like superior anatomy or like other window perks. I guess like crowd control probably just calls it like vaults or something. Like I bet you that it's just not referred to as windows in like that might be what the issue is. I'm not sure.
Crowd control doesn't come up for palette. Oh wait, I need to look for window.
Yeah, for window.
Okay, crowd control. The entity blocks a window for 20 seconds after.
All right, well, behavior you suck. I don't know what to tell you. I take it all back. The search bar sucks.
All right, well, that's gonna be it for this episode. Overall, like PTB, largely positive. Main building of the new map, pretty dog. The EMPs interacting with the killer power probably a little too strong. Pyramid head, huge buff, but overall, like, pretty happy with it.
Yeah, definitely a lot more positive than negative. Definitely a nice change of pace. Probably coping a little bit because in comparison to the past two chapters being so bad, that might be part of it. That's fogging our view a little bit. But
Maybe.
I do. There really isn't many things that I. It's not even that I'm like meh on a lot of stuff. I actually am like very happy.
I mean,
with
now
a lot
that
of
you
the
say that,
changes.
now I'm thinking that behavior is just gaslighting us. Like, give us dog shit after dog shit after dog
Lower
shit
the
chapter,
bar,
and
lower the
then
expectations.
they just do like the bare minimum, and they're like, "Good job, behavior.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
did so well."
Yeah.
All
We'll
right.
see.
Well, with that, this episode's going to come to a close. If you'd like to find me, you can find me on Twitter or on Twitch at ScrapBrain SE2. And Subtle, if people want to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
I'm Z Subtle on Twitter, on TikTok, and on Twitch. And you can find me in any of those places. I usually post clips relatively daily on like TikTok and Twitter these days, so you can follow me there.
Cool. And I hope that you all, again, light us up in the comments about our take on Scavenger. I'm ready.
Yeah, I'm totally ready.
All right. Have a great day. Bye.
Peace.